My name is Alexa, 26 years old, and a private wealth strategist who shifts billions across Wall Street for a living. Yet, the most devastating fraud I ever encountered was sleeping in my own bed. My husband demanded a divorce in the middle of our private Manhattan penthouse during a freezing December blizzard. He looked at me with dead eyes, threw a leather-bound folder on the table, and declared he was taking our multi-million-dollar estate, our luxury cars, and our entire investment portfolio. The only thing he explicitly refused to give me was a single dime of the empire we built together, tossing me a worn-out Samsonite suitcase and calling me a small-town liability. He expected me to shatter into pieces and beg him to stay. His mother stood right next to him, smirking, telling me to take my trash and get out. Instead, I stood before a judge a week later and calmly gave him exactly what he asked for. He smiled a victorious smirk, completely unaware that I had just handed him the keys to his absolute ruin. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. If you have ever had your heart ripped out by the person who promised to protect you, only to realize they were just using you all along, hit the like button and subscribe. You won't want to miss how a single hidden clause changed everything. The view from the penthouse on the 48th floor of the Mercer Tower was designed to make a man feel like a god. Below, the grid of Manhattan stretched out like a glittering circuit board, pulsing with the electricity of pure, unadulterated wealth. For the past 3 years, Alexa had watched that view change, but tonight, as the first heavy flakes of a late December blizzard began to plaster themselves against the floor-to-ceiling glass, she realized the view hadn't changed at all. Only the man standing in front of it had. Chad stood by the window, the tailored fabric of his Tom Ford suit catching the soft amber glow of the recessed lighting. In his right hand, he swirled a glass of 25-year-old Macallan, the ice clinking rhythmically against the crystal. A month ago, Chad had been named the youngest managing director at Vanguard Crest, one of Wall Street's most aggressive hedge funds. Tonight, he wasn't just a husband anymore. He was a man who believed his own press releases. Across the room, nestled in a vintage velvet armchair that cost more than Alexa's entire childhood home in Ohio, sat Eleanor. Chad's mother was a woman chiseled from old money and social disdain. She sipped her Earl Grey tea from an 18th-century porcelain cup, her sharp, manicured fingers holding the saucer with practiced elegance. Her eyes, cold and calculating, drifted over Alexa's simple, off-the-rack dress. To Eleanor, Alexa had always been a stain on the family tapestry, a temporary inconvenience that Chad would eventually outgrow. The gala at the Met next week requires a certain pedigree. Chad, Eleanor spoke, her voice smooth, dripping with passive-aggressive poison. She didn't look at Alexa, treating her as if she were a piece of mismatched furniture. The investors from London are bringing their daughters. True Upper East Side royalty. A man in your position needs a partner who commands the room, not someone who looks like she's waiting to take the coats. Chad didn't contradict her. He didn't even flinch. He just took a slow sip of his whiskey, his eyes remaining fixed on the snow-covered skyline. I know, Mother. The firm is expanding. The optics matter now more than ever. Alexa stood near the edge of the plush Persian rug, her hands folded neatly in front of her. The silence in the room was suffocating, heavy with an unspoken expiration date. Over the past 6 months, the affection that had once defined their early days in a cramped Queens apartment had completely evaporated. Chad's late nights, the sudden lock codes on his devices, and the lingering scent of expensive French perfume that wasn't hers had painted a picture too vivid to ignore. He had outgrown the woman who had supported him when he was just an intern pulling 80-hour weeks. Let's not stretch this theatrical display out any longer, Chad, Eleanor said, setting her teacup down with a sharp clink that echoed in the quiet room. Bring out the documents. It's past midnight, and I would like to return to the Hamptons before the roads freeze entirely. Chad finally turned away from the window. The warmth Alexa had fallen in love with years ago was entirely gone, replaced by the sterile, calculating gaze of a Wall Street executioner. He walked over to the massive mahogany desk, picked up a thick, leather-bound folder, and threw it carelessly onto the glass coffee table in front of Alexa. Next to the folder, waiting by the door, stood her old Samsonite suitcase, the cheap, scratched fabric entirely out of place against the marble floors. It was the exact same suitcase she had brought with her from Ohio, packed tightly with her modest clothes and a few personal keepsakes. "It's over, Alexa," Chad said, his voice devoid of any human emotion, perfectly mimicking the tone he used when cutting underperforming assets from his portfolio. "The paperwork is ready. Sign it, and let's end this cleanly." Alexa did not reach for the documents immediately. Instead, she walked over to the glass coffee table, her eyes scanning the bold letters stamped on the front of the folder: Dissolution of Marriage and Property Settlement. Eleanor leaned forward, her silver rings catching the light. "Don't bother looking for loopholes, darling. Chad's legal team spent 3 weeks ensuring that our family asset protection is absolute. You are leaving this penthouse exactly the way you entered it, penniless." Chad walked over, leaning against the edge of the desk with his arms crossed. "According to the prenup we signed 3 years ago, all appreciation of Vanguard Crest and its subsidiary assets belongs strictly to me. You're entitled to a $5,000 relocation allowance. I've already had it wired to your account. Take the suitcase and go. My driver is waiting downstairs to take you to a motel in Queens." The absolute lack of remorse in his voice would have crushed most people. They had shared a life. She had cooked his meals, managed his schedule, and quieted her own ambitions so he could chase his. And now, he was treating her like an expired lease. But Alexa didn't cry. She didn't scream and she didn't beg. A profound, unsettling stillness washed over her. She looked from Chad's smug face to Eleanor's icy smirk, and then down at the worn, blue Samsonite suitcase waiting by the door. A faint, almost imperceptible smile played at the corners of Alexa's lips. $5,000, Alexa murmured, her voice steady and chillingly calm. "You're very generous, Chad." "I'm being practical," Chad snapped, misinterpreting her calm for defeat. "Just sign the damn papers, Alexa. Don't make me call building security to escort you out." Without another word, Alexa picked up the heavy Mont Blanc pen resting on the folder. She didn't flip through the pages to read the unfair distribution of their assets. She didn't check the clauses that stripped her of the penthouse, the cars, or the joint savings. She flipped straight to the final signature page, placed the tip of the pen on the line, and signed her name in elegant, sweeping cursive. X. Alexa Vance. She snapped the pen shut and placed it neatly back on the glass table. Eleanor let out a sharp, victorious breath, relaxing back into her velvet chair. "Smart girl. At least you possess enough self-preservation to know when you've been beaten." Alexa picked up the handle of the old Samsonite suitcase. The wheels groaned against the pristine marble floor, a harsh, grating sound in the luxurious room. She stopped at the threshold of the penthouse door, turning back to look at the man she had loved for half a decade. "Goodbye, Chad," she said softly. "I hope the view from up here remains as beautiful as you think it is." Before he could answer, she stepped out into the carpeted hallway, and the heavy door clicked shut behind her. Descending in the private elevator, the silence enveloped her. When the doors opened to the freezing New York night, the blizzard was howling, tossing sheets of white snow across the pavement. The wind bit through her thin coat, but Alexa felt entirely numb. She walked past the idling black town car Chad had hired, ignoring the driver who held the door open for her. Instead, she dragged her suitcase half a block down the street, stepping into the dim overhang of a closed subway station. Pulling out her phone, she dialed a number she hadn't called in 3 long years. The line rang twice before a deep, authoritative voice answered. "Speak." Alexa looked back up at the glowing tower she had just left, her eyes flashing with a cold, calculating fire. "It's done. Chad just executed the divorce papers and officially triggered the asset separation clause. I have the briefcase. Initiate phase 1. "Understood, ma'am," the voice responded smoothly. "The legal teams are on standby. Wall Street won't know what hit them." Alexa ended the call, slipped her phone into her pocket, and gripped the handle of the old suitcase. They thought they were throwing out a piece of trash. They had no idea they had just handed her the keys to their destruction. 3 days after the blizzard, the atmosphere inside the private dining room at Le Bernardin was thick with the scent of white truffles, expensive cigars, and unbridled arrogance. Chad sat at the head of a long mahogany table, his arm draped casually around the back of the chair belonging to Juliana Vance, the daughter of one of Vanguard Crest's most powerful institutional investors. She was exactly what Eleanor had demanded: Upper East Side royalty, draped in diamonds that blinked like cold stars under the chandelier light. To the future of Vanguard Crest, Mr. Vance, Juliana's father, raised a crystal flute of Dom Perignon, his voice booming across the room. And to the brilliant mind who is about to orchestrate the biggest merger Wall Street has seen this quarter. To Chad. The table erupted into applause. Chad beamed, raising his glass in acknowledgement, soaking in the adulation. Across from him, Eleanor smiled with a triumphant, feeling satisfaction. The stain of his previous marriage had been successfully bleached from their lives. "Thank you, everyone," Chad said, his voice dripping with smooth confidence. "The merger between Vanguard Crest and Apex Holdings is watertight. By next month, we will be managing over $10 billion in assets. We're not just playing the market anymore. We are going to dictate it." "And what about the minor complication?" Mr. Vance asked, lowering his voice slightly, though his smile remained intact. "Your ex-wife? I trust the legal loose ends have been entirely cauterized." Chad let out a short, dismissive laugh, taking a sip of his champagne. "Alexa." She signed the papers without even reading them. "My legal team drafted a prenuptial agreement 3 years ago that left her completely defenseless." She walked out with a single, battered suitcase and a $5,000 check. She's probably halfway back to her cow town in Ohio by now. Eleanor chimed in, her voice smooth and dripping with aristocratic disdain. "The girl was entirely out of her depth, Robert. She lacked the capacity to understand the world Chad operates in. She took what she was given and left quietly. She knew she was beaten." Juliana leaned over, pressing her lips against Chad's cheek. "I'm glad that's over, babe. A man with your trajectory shouldn't be held back by dead weight." Chad squeezed her hand, his eyes shining with the intoxicating illusion of absolute victory. He felt invincible. The SEC filings were prepared, the board members of Apex Holdings were aligned, and his bank account was about to swell beyond his wildest dreams. He had stripped Alexa of everything, protected his empire, and secured a seat among the financial elite. He had no reason to suspect that the foundation of his entire empire was already beginning to fracture. He had no reason to think about the worn, blue Samsonite suitcase he had so carelessly thrown out into the snow. To Chad, it was just trash. He didn't know that inside that very suitcase lay the one document that could dismantle his life in a single day. While Chad was basking in the champagne-soaked adulation of Midtown Manhattan, Alexa was staring at a very different view from a modest, dimly lit loft in Dumbio, Brooklyn. The brick walls were bare, and the room was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the heater fighting off the outside frost. In the center of the hardwood floor sat the old blue Samsonite suitcase. Alexa knelt beside it. Her fingers traced the deep scratches on the plastic shell scars from a time when she actually believed Chad loved her. With a pocket knife, she carefully sliced into the thick, dark fabric of the inner lining. She reached inside the hidden compartment and pulled out a thick, pristine manila envelope. Inside were the original deeds, corporate seals, and a notarized document stamped by the state of Ohio 3 years ago. It was the charter for the Buckeye Genesis Trust, an anonymous multi-million-dollar entity. A sharp knock rattled the door. Alexa stood up as Marcus Vance, the senior founding partner of Skadden Arps, stepped into the loft. He wasn't just any lawyer. He was a titan of corporate law, the kind of attorney who charged $2,000 an hour just to answer the phone. He was also Alexa's uncle, a secret she had kept hidden from Chad's family to ensure Chad was loved for who he was, not what he could gain. "You look well, Alexa," Marcus said, placing his leather briefcase on the table and looking at the papers. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we file these, there is no turning back. Your husband's firm will be decimated." "He isn't my husband anymore, Uncle Marcus," Alexa said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute coldness. "He made sure of that 3 days ago. He wanted to enforce our prenup word for word. I'm just giving him exactly what he asked for." Marcus adjusted his glasses, looking down at the Ohio Trust documents. Chad still believes Vanguard Crest was saved by a random angel investor during his first year as an intern. He has no idea that the seed capital, the $20 million that kept his firm from bankruptcy and allowed him to climb the corporate ladder, came directly from your family's private estate. "He thought I was just a small-town girl from Ohio with nothing to offer," Alexa said, a sharp, humorless laugh escaping her lips. "He and his mother treated my background like a disease. They didn't realize that my family chose anonymity because we value privacy, not because we lack power." Marcus nodded, pulling out a tablet and bringing up the SEC filing drafts. The trap is set. By signing the final dissolution papers, Chad officially triggered the change of control clause embedded inside the original capital injection agreement from 2023. "He thought he was protecting his assets from you. Instead, he just handed us the legal trigger to reclaim the entire foundation of his company." Alexa picked up a pen, looking at the documents that would soon turn Wall Street upside down. "Let him enjoy his dinner tonight," Alexa said quietly, signing the authorization forms with an unshakable hand. "Tomorrow, we take back everything." By Tuesday morning, the rumors began as a faint whisper on Bloomberg terminals before mutating into a full-blown panic across the trading floors of Lower Manhattan. Chad sat in his glass-walled office at Vanguard Crest, the phone on his desk ringing incessantly. On his computer screens, the real-time data charts for Vanguard's flagship fund were flashing an ominous, deep crimson. "What do you mean, our liquidity is tightening?" Chad barked into his headset, slamming his palm onto the mahogany desk. "We are 48 hours away from signing the merger agreement with Apex Holdings. The capital reserves should be locked." On the other end of the line, his head trader sounded breathless, his voice laced with pure panic. "Chad, someone is quietly buying up our short-term debt obligations. They're not attacking our stock, they are buying our liabilities. Over 40% of our floating leverage has been consolidated by a single institutional buyer in the last 24 hours. If they call in those notes, we don't have the cash to cover them." Chad ripped the headset off and threw it against the wall. His heart was hammering against his ribs. He stood up, pacing the length of his office. This was supposed to be his coronation week. He had successfully discarded his baggage of a wife, secured the backing of the Vance family, and was on the verge of becoming a billionaire. This sudden liquidity squeeze made no sense. The door to his office burst open, and Eleanor stepped inside, her face uncharacteristically pale. The pristine composure she usually maintained looked fractured. "Chad, what is going on with the board?" she demanded, closing the door sharply behind her. "I just received a call from Juliana's father. He said Vanguard's compliance team is frantic. There are rumors of an unmapped, third-party audit being forced upon us." "It's just a market anomaly, Mother," Chad lied, trying to steady his breathing and maintain his veneer of absolute control. "Some predatory hedge fund is trying to shake us down before the merger. It's standard Wall Street bullying. Our legal team, led by Vance, has everything under lock and key. We are bulletproof." Just then, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown, encrypted number. Chad frowned, tapping the screen. "Enjoy the view from your desk today, Chad. It's the last day you'll ever sit in that chair with the title of managing director. See you in the deposition room tomorrow morning." Chad's fingers froze over the screen. He stared at the text, a sudden icy drop of sweat rolling down the back of his neck. He tried to dial the number back, but the line was already disconnected. "Is it her?" Eleanor whispered, noticing his sudden change in posture, her eyes narrowing. "Is that pathetic girl trying to threaten you? Did her low-class family hire some third-rate strip mall lawyer to contest the settlement?" Chad let out a forced, hollow laugh, deleting the message. "Alexa, please. She doesn't have the intellect to understand a balance sheet, let alone orchestrate a market play against Vanguard Crest. Tomorrow is our final divorce hearing and the official merger signing. She'll receive her $5,000, and we will receive our $10 billion empire. Let her play her little mind games." But as Chad looked back out at the gray, winter sky looming over Manhattan, the confidence in his voice sounded empty, even to his own ears. The trap had been laid, the jaws were closing, and Chad was still walking blindly into the slaughter. The conference room on the 60th floor of the Midtown Judicial Center was suffocatingly quiet. Chad and Eleanor sat on the left side of the massive glass table, flanked by senior partner Vance and a team of junior attorneys. Chad was dressed impeccably, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed his sleepless night. The market anomaly from yesterday hadn't resolved. It had worsened, but he forced a confident smirk onto his face as the double doors opened. Alexa walked in. She wore an immaculate, midnight black tailored suit that radiated quiet authority. Behind her walked Marcus Vance, carrying a slim leather folder. Chad's lawyer, Mr. Vance, looked up, his brow furrowing as he recognized the legendary Skadden Arps attorney. "Marcus?" Mr. Vance stood up, his voice laced with sudden unease. "What is the meaning of this? You don't represent individuals in low-level matrimonial disputes." "I don't," Marcus said smoothly, taking a seat next to Alexa and placing the folder on the table. "But I do represent the primary institutional creditor of Vanguard Crest. We are here to finalize the dissolution of marriage and execute the absolute property settlement." Chad let out a sharp, dismissive chuckle. "Let's get this over with. Alexa, sign the final execution decree. Your $5,000 check is right here. Take it, take your cheap blue suitcase, and let's close this chapter." Alexa didn't look at the check. She looked directly at Chad, her eyes entirely devoid of warmth. "The papers are already signed, Chad. I signed them a week ago in your penthouse. Today is simply about enforcing the terms you insisted upon." The judge presiding over the dissolution cleared his throat, tapping a gavel against a wooden block. "Before I sign off on the final decree, the court requires the plaintiff's counsel to read aloud the finalized property distribution, specifically taking into account Appendix C, Section 4, which was activated by the defendant's signature last week." Mr. Vance pulled the final document package toward him. He adjusted his glasses, completely confident that his ironclad prenup would strip Alexa of everything. He flipped to the final page, his mouth opening to speak. Your Honor, according to the standard prenuptial terms. Suddenly, the words caught in his throat. Mr. Vance's eyes widened behind his lenses. The color drained from his face so fast it looked as if he had seen a ghost. His hands began to tremble, rattling the thick parchment paper against the glass table. Vance, Eleanor frowned, her voice sharp with impatience. What is it? Read it. I can't, Vance whispered, a bead of cold sweat dripping down his temple. Read it, counselor, the judge commanded, his voice echoing in the silent room. Mr. Vance swallowed hard, his voice cracking. Appendix C, Section 4. In the event of a dissolution of marriage initiated or forced by the managing director, Chad Thomas, the hidden identity of the sole lender of the Bucky Genesis Trust is hereby revealed to be Alexa Vance. Furthermore, he stopped, looking at Chad with pure horror. Keep reading, Chad shouted, slamming his hands on the table, a cold panic seizing his chest. Furthermore, the original seed capital agreement of $20 million from 2023 contains an absolute change of control clause. By executing this divorce and separating his personal assets, the managing director has triggered an automatic debt-to-equity conversion. 100% of the voting shares, corporate assets, and intellectual property of Vanguard Crest are hereby transferred immediately to the lender to satisfy the outstanding liability. The defendant walks away with zero equity. The room erupted into absolute chaos. No, that's impossible. She's a nobody from Ohio, Chad screamed, lunging across the table toward Alexa, only for two burly court officers to instantly pin him to his chair. Eleanor's hand flew to her throat, her pearl necklace snapping under the pressure of her grip, scattering white beads across the floor like tiny drops of ice. She stared at Alexa, her mouth opening and closing in silent, paralyzed shock. Alexa slowly stood up, looking down at the panicked, broken man who had thrown her out into the blizzard just days ago. You told me to read the prenup word for word, Chad, Alexa said, her voice dropping into a register of absolute, chilling victory. You should have checked what was hidden inside the lining of that old Samsonite suitcase before you threw it away. The fallout from the deposition room was instantaneous and unmerciful. By 2:00 p.m. that afternoon, the news had shattered the financial world. Wall Street journals and digital ticker boards across Manhattan flashed the same breaking headline: Vanguard Crest coup, managing director ousted via hidden prenuptial clause. Chad stood in the lobby of the Mercer Tower, staring blankly at the two armed security guards who blocked his path to the private elevators. In his hands, he held a flimsy cardboard box filled with his personal desk items: a silver pen set, a framed photo of his sports car, and a stack of revoked trading licenses. His corporate security badge had been cleanly snapped in half at the front desk. You can't do this, Chad yelled, his voice cracking with desperation as he glared at the building supervisor. I built the Vanguard flagship fund. I am the managing director. Not anymore, Mr. Thomas, the supervisor replied coldly, his tone devoid of the sycophantic warmth Chad had grown accustomed to over the past 3 years. We received an official directive from Skadden Arps on behalf of the new majority shareholder. Your access to the penthouse and the trading floors has been permanently terminated. You have 24 hours to vacate the residential premises. Before Chad could process the blow, his phone vibrated violently in his pocket. It was Mr. Vance. Chad answered frantically, pressing the phone to his ear. Robert, listen to me, the lawyers are sorting out the anomaly. Save your breath, Chad. Mr. Vance's voice cut through the line, cold and transactional. The merger between Vanguard and Apex Holdings is dead. My compliance team just reviewed the new ownership filings. I will not allow my capital, or my daughter, to be associated with a man who has been legally stripped of his own firm overnight. What about Juliana? Chad stammered, looking around the bustling lobby as people began to whisper and point at him. Juliana knows we. Juliana is currently packing her things from your Hamptons estate, Mr. Vance interrupted ruthlessly. Don't contact her again. You're a liability, Chad. And on Wall Street, we liquidate liabilities. The line went dead. Chad lowered the phone, his hands shaking so violently that a crystal paperweight slid out of his cardboard box and shattered against the marble floor. At the same moment, a notification popped up on his screen from his bank. Account status alert, primary business accounts frozen due to ongoing corporate restructuring and litigation. Every single domino he had meticulously set up: the billion-dollar merger, the elite social standing, the wealthy fiancé had fallen in a matter of hours. The very system he had used to crush Alexa had turned its massive, cold gears and crushed him instead. He was no longer a god looking down on Manhattan. He was just a man standing in a lobby, holding a box of trash, with the freezing winter air rushing in every time the glass doors slid open. The wind outside the Mercer Tower was relentless, sweeping through the concrete canyons of Manhattan and carrying with it the bitter chill of the ongoing winter. On the snow-dusted sidewalk, a scene was unfolding that drew the stares of hurried brokers and onlookers. Eleanor stood huddled near the entrance, her expensive mink coat offering little protection against the biting cold. Her face, usually a mask of aristocratic perfection, was flushed with a mixture of panic and deep humiliation. When the glass doors opened and Alexa stepped out, flanked by Marcus Vance and her security detail, Eleanor rushed forward, abandoning every shred of the dignity she had spent a lifetime cultivating. "Alexa, please, stop," Eleanor cried out, her voice cracking as she reached out a gloved hand, only to be politely but firmly blocked by Alexa's lead security guard. "You have to listen to me. This has gone too far. Chad is ruined. They are repossessing the penthouse, his name is blacklisted across the street, and the banks are calling in everything. You loved him once, Alexa. You can't do this to him. You can't do this to our family." Alexa stopped. She turned slowly, her expression completely unreadable behind her dark sunglasses. She looked down at Eleanor, whose eyes were wide with desperation, tears threatening to ruin her meticulously applied makeup. "Your family, Eleanor?" Alexa asked, her voice calm, cutting through the howling wind like a razor. "A month ago, you sat in my home and told me I lacked the pedigree to even take coats at a gala. You stood by and cheered while your son threw me out into a literal blizzard with nothing but a $5,000 check and a piece of luggage you called trash. Where was your sense of family then?" "We were wrong," Eleanor pleaded, her hands trembling as she looked past Alexa toward Marcus Vance, hoping for a shred of legal leniency. We didn't understand who you were. If you just drop the restructuring clause, we can settle this quietly. We can fix this." "You still don't get it," Alexa said softly, stepping closer so only Eleanor could hear her next words. "You're not sorry you treated me like dirt, Eleanor. You're just sorry you got caught. You only value me now because you know what my name is worth on a balance sheet. That isn't respect. That's just survival." From behind them, Chad approached the curb, his cardboard box of personal belongings tucked awkwardly under his arm. He looked completely hollowed out, his expensive suit disheveled, staring at the woman he had completely underestimated. He opened his mouth to speak, to beg, to to offer an apology he had never intended to give until his empire crumbled. But Alexa didn't give him the chance. She didn't look back at him. She looked down at the sidewalk, where the old blue Samsonite suitcase sat near the rear bumper of a waiting, midnight black town car. Her assistant picked up the suitcase and placed it carefully into the trunk. "Keep the $5,000, Chad," Alexa said, turning her back on them as the chauffeur opened the passenger door. "Consider it my relocation allowance for you and your mother. You have 24 hours to leave Wall Street." Alexa stepped into the warmth of the vehicle. The door closed with a solid, heavy thud, sealing out the noise of the city. As the town car pulled away from the curb and merged into the Manhattan traffic, Chad and Eleanor were left standing on the freezing pavement, completely ignored by the passing crowds, left with nothing but the bitter winter air